The story begins with Lee waking up in the morning to start running several kilometers. Then, in the afternoon, he practices punching several times, and in the evening, he begins 3 major exercises: bench press, squat, and deadlift, each with several sets and repetitions per set. To repeat this routine for days, the protagonist decides to quit his job. Someone asks him if he's gone mad, and maybe it would be better if he were, because one day, a status window appears before him saying, "The door to the apocalypse will soon open, time remaining until the end of the world, a few days, a few hours, a few minutes, a few seconds." Essentially, this notification tells him that the world is about to end. As the seconds continue to count down, we shift to a few days earlier, where everyone starts receiving messages that monsters have appeared near the mountains, so residents in those areas should evacuate immediately if they spot a monster. However, these monsters appear in various areas and mountains across the country. Then, everyone gets a live video link showing that monsters have indeed appeared, and this is 100% real, not a hoax. A boy very close to the monster says in fear that there really is a monster, and as the monster notices the boy's presence, he tells the viewers he needs to get a little closer. But the viewers or followers tell him to look behind him, yet the monster is already very close to the boy because he thought the monster couldn't move. Hearing the boy scream, Lee, who had been watching the broadcast, curses in shock. He also wonders why the video looks so realistic, but then he realizes that he's still receiving disaster warning texts, making him question what's really happening. However, Lee, who is several years old, after seeing the signs of a trap, says life has been hard enough, and now they're talking about monsters no one will believe in. With a sigh, he mentions that there have been too many fake videos like this lately, but at the same time, he realizes something. We then see that it's a small monster trapped in one of the traps, but upon seeing the creature, he wonders why there's a monster there. He feels a little scared and thinks he should be in math class. However, when the monster sees Lee about to leave, it starts growling before showing a rather friendly expression. Seeing this, Lee realizes the monster is asking for his help. Despite the monster's efforts to be sweet and ask for help, Lee is still very scared. But seeing the monster's glowing eyes, Lee tells himself that he's human, while that's a monster, and no one is kind enough to show compassion to a monster. With his eyes closed, Lee says he can't help the monster, even though it looks at him with hopeful eyes. However, the monster shows a photo, as if to say it has a family at home. Then, the scene shifts, and Lee is seen looking very surprised because there's a silver goblin pill in his hand. Once consumed, the pill grants power. Lee obtained the pill after he finally helped the monster and even received a reward from it. He couldn't believe that the creature was actually a monster. But holding the system, he wonders what the silver goblin pill really is and whether the system is some kind of hologram. When the system says he should consume it, Lee wonders who would eat something so suspicious. At the same time, urgent news appeared on television about the sudden emergence of large, unknown structures resembling towers across the world. Additionally, the news reported that contact had been lost with the United States military forces that had entered these towers. The news anchor stated that the appearance of monsters and these unknown towers indicated that the apocalypse had truly begun. While Lee was on high alert due to this news, a sudden explosion occurred outside his apartment. He quickly turned to see what had happened, where people outside were running, some pointing towards a large tower that was beginning to appear. The television news then reported that a large tower had also appeared in Korea. Seeing this, Lee clenched his fists tightly, looked back at his system, and remarked that he wasn't sure if this was the right decision. While taking the pill, he said it would be the only time he would do something so crazy. After swallowing the pill, his body began to emit a blue light, and the system informed him that he had unlocked the Sage's status window. The Sage's status window provided the user with the highest survival index in the current situation. After that, a book-like object slowly started to materialize in front of him. Once Lee held the object, he began to open it, and the book emitted a strong blue light. A system called Guide told him that the gates of the apocalypse would soon open, and the time remaining until the apocalypse was being counted down in days, hours, minutes, and seconds. The guide also provided him with suggested missions, strength training, cardiovascular training, and learning kendo. Then, we moved to the present day, where Lee had begun following the guide's recommendations, abandoning all other activities for several days to focus solely on training. After the apocalypse arrived, he was transported to a completely different place. In the forest, at that moment, a creature emerged from the bushes. Seeing it, Lee wondered if it was a monster, as it looked cuter than he imagined, a raccoon-like creature with a single horn. However, the one-horned raccoon suddenly changed its expression to something very menacing and quickly leaped towards Lee. But with the basic swordsmanship skills Lee had, it was enough to defeat the monster. The system message read, "You have killed the one-horned raccoon, you have gained experience." As the raccoon's soul ascended to the heavens, Lee commented that the raccoon was defeated with a single basic Eskrima strike, indicating that the raccoon was quite weak, perhaps because it was a tutorial monster. However, Lee also realized that using basic Eskrima consumed MP, and he had only a small amount of MP, allowing him to use basic Eskrima only 5 times. This meant he needed to conserve as much MP as possible while hunting monsters. Then, Lee began to eliminate several more one-horned raccoons. You have gained experience. You are now level 2. You have received HP and MP. When you level up, you receive points that can be used to enhance your stats. Points remaining, 2. Upon seeing this notification, Lee was quite pleased and mentioned that he had just leveled up, and it was just in time since his mana was almost depleted. But then he noticed that the remaining points notification window started to disappear. Adjusting player level. You are now level 1. Knowledge burden. Since you have the Sage's status window, you will level up more slowly compared to other players. Lee, shocked to see this notification, said there was a penalty for having the Sage's status window, and he couldn't believe that the level he just gained had been taken back. He also wondered when he would be able to level up again. Feeling that this was a very unfair advantage, Lee opened his status window and was surprised to see something different. He still had remaining points. Lee thought that if his assumption was correct, this wasn't a penalty but a beneficial bug. After that, Lee began killing monsters again to gain experience and level up to level 2. However, due to the penalty, he dropped back to level 1, but still had remaining points to increase his stats. Lee was very pleased and mentioned that the higher the level, the more experience is required for the next level. So, it was easier to increase his stats this way than to level up normally. Lee then decided to enhance his stats. He had 4 options: energy, agility, sensitivity, and strength. Strength and agility were the best choices for a swordsman because strength would increase attack power, and agility would enhance speed and reflexes. However, the most needed stat at that moment was sensitivity. His sensitivity increased by 4 points after enhancing that stat. Quickly, he took down another one-horned raccoon. Lee said that the one-horned raccoon was not as strong as he expected from a tutorial monster since he could defeat it easily even with basic stats. Recalling the guide's advice to kill as many monsters as possible, Lee wondered how many one-horned raccoons he could find within the given time. However, it became easier to find them now that his sensitivity was higher, and he felt he could sense some kind of aura with his increased sensitivity. But after Lee managed to defeat all the monsters, a level 2 one-horned raccoon appeared behind him. While wondering what kind of monster it was, the one-horned raccoon attacked him with high speed. However, Lee managed to dodge the attack and noticed that the monster was quite fast and behaved like a beast. Lee wondered if it was the boss. As Lee prepared himself, the one-horned raccoon attacked again with high speed. However, Lee successfully defeated it. You have defeated the one-horned raccoon boss. You have completed a hidden mission. Reward, gold. After Lee finished and received the notification, he looked at the monster and mentioned that it turned out to be at that level. But at that moment, the tutorial had ended. He didn't expect that time would feel so long. As Lee continued, he suddenly fell silent because he was now in a completely different place with more people around him. But at that moment, someone on a loudspeaker welcomed everyone, informing them that they had successfully completed the tutorial and were currently in the tower's lobby, in Area C. Hearing the voice, Lee began to look around and realized there were men and women around him. He wondered if they had all completed the tutorial and been sent there. Everyone seemed panicked, which was understandable given that the entire world had changed in just one day. If he hadn't known that the world was ending beforehand, he might have panicked like them. Clenching his fist, Lee told himself that he had to stay calm because he needed to get out of there safely. Then, we switch to a girl who asks where they are. Someone responds that they are in the Tower of the End. After hearing the answer, the girl looked at who was speaking, and it turned out to be a small Sniffles who began greeting everyone. Sniffles said that he was the guardian of the tower and the guardian of the lower floors, and his name was Sniffles. The people, seeing and hearing him, were very surprised and said that he appeared out of nowhere. Someone asked if he was a little kid in a Sniffles costume. However, Sniffles, while sighing, said that this was a normal response. But at that moment, he was interrupted by Lee, who asked if he could ask something because if this was truly the end of the world, then what should they do? That event left Sniffles quite surprised, who then pointed to Lee and said that it was a good question. Meanwhile, with a changed expression, Sniffles mentioned that the players there would participate in a game with their lives at stake, causing the humans to start sweating coldly as their lives were on the line. However, Sniffles continued to tell them that all the humans on Earth were currently in the tower, and they had to cooperate on each mission on every floor to reach the top of the tower. Lee. Upon hearing this, Lee asked Sniffles if they could return to their normal lives after reaching the top of the tower. However, with a small smile, Sniffles replied that he didn't know either. Lee then asked what the point of climbing the tower was. Sniffles, in a very relaxed manner, replied that there was no need to search for meaning in everything, as only death awaited those who did not climb the tower. Additionally, Sniffles turned with a terrifying expression and said that many people had died in the tutorial. After hearing this from Sniffles, Lee wondered why he hadn't considered that, even though he knew it was just a tutorial. However, he was sure that many people couldn't make it through, and as he imagined some children and elderly people, he thought it was impossible, but he didn't finish his sentence because he was interrupted by Sniffles, who asked if anyone was willing to try to kill him because he needed to die to be able to go home. Furthermore, there was a special reward for anyone who helped him. Lee, after hearing this, wondered if it was a trap, because Sniffles didn't seem strong from the outside, but it was unlikely that he could win against someone at a certain level, so he decided to wait and observe for the time being. However, the guide told him to help the lower floor guard to return home. Lee, after seeing the notification, thought that it meant he could attack Sniffles since he had never been hurt by following what the guide said. However, he questioned whether it was worth doing something so reckless, so he began cursing because he didn't know what to do. But at the same time, someone said that they would do it because if Sniffles wanted to die, then he must kill him, and while Sniffles said that he could go home, the man, with a smile and drawing his sword, told Sniffles not to regret it because he would kill him in the most painful way. So he immediately started attacking Sniffles, but before his sword could hit Sniffles, he was struck brutally across the face, causing fear among those in the man's path as he fell lifelessly. Here we see who struck him. It turns out it was Sniffles himself, who had transformed into a muscular Sniffles, saying that he fought back by accident. This left everyone there silent because the man lay lifeless on the ground, and everyone there started running and screaming. Lee, seeing the incident, felt very scared and thought that if he had volunteered, it would have been the end for him. However, Sniffles said to everyone, laughing, that it was just a mistake, then asked if there were any other volunteers. But Lee, looking at the notification, thought that the guide had lied to him. And while Sniffles was covered in blood, he asked again who wanted to help Sniffles retire early, but no one dared to answer, including Lee, who, with a very frightened expression, kept thinking repeatedly that the tower guide had lied to him. However, at that moment, the system notified him that the Wise Eye status window had been activated. The Wise Eye status window allows you to see the status of others, and guides will be sent to you from time to time. However, because of this ability, you will level up slower compared to other players. Lee, after seeing the ability called Wise Eye, wondered with great surprise if there were other abilities besides the Wise Eye status window, and he didn't know why it suddenly appeared. So he used his ability on Sniffles, then smiled and said that was the reason, and while Sniffles, with a rather friendly face, kept asking, Lee stopped him by saying that he would do it because the tower guide hadn't lied to him. However, Sniffles, after seeing him, said that Lee was at level 1. Lee, after hearing this, asked if the level mattered when doing a good deed. Sniffles, with a changed expression again, replied that maybe it didn't. And while Lee was getting ready, Sniffles asked him to send him home quickly, but at that moment, they were stopped by a girl who told Lee to wait because it was too dangerous and someone had just died. However, this girl wasn't the only one, as others also said that the girl was right. He shouldn't do something so reckless, but Lee said there was nothing to worry about because he had a plan, which made the girl a bit confused. After that, Lee, who was getting ready with full confidence, told the girl that she would see something exciting. But at the same time, Sniffles, who looked cute, quickly changed back to attack Lee. As Sniffles' large fist approached Lee's face, he thought there was something strange in what Sniffles said. He was sure there were people in that place, but Sniffles said otherwise, which made him wonder if it was just a mistake. However, he then realized that the mistake of facing a level C monster and the fear of being killed was something done intentionally. The reason Sniffles mentioned the wrong number was because there were no people there from the beginning, but rather holograms of humans created by Sniffles. As Sniffles disappeared, he said to Lee that he was pretty good. Here, we see Sniffles' stats, who has the title of a low-level moderator, and his form was not the original because it was just a hologram that disappeared when it took damage. Before completely disappearing, Sniffles said to those who dared, "Good luck," and then he vanished entirely. After that, Lee realized that Sniffles left a small ball containing stat points, and as he picked up the ball, someone asked how he knew that Sniffles wouldn't kill him. Lee said that he happened to see blood dripping through the girl, so her face and clothes should have been covered in blood because of their close distance. That's why he thought it was all just a show. Of course, everything Lee said was just an excuse because he was actually using a sage's ability. However, at that moment, he was stopped by a Kim who said it was a waste for Lee to have the ball because he was just lucky. If he had noticed, he would have stepped forward. However, upon hearing this, Lee asked what he meant by waste. Kim, with a CU level, said that the fact that Lee was still at level 1 despite completing the tutorial showed that he was very weak, or couldn't kill anything and just ran away. Furthermore, he would just die quickly, so for the sake of humanity, he gave Lee the opportunity to hand over the ball to him. Lee, who was holding his ball tightly, wondered what was wrong with Kim and whether he was serious. However, at that moment, he crushed the ball, gaining 1 stat point, because giving up the ball wasn't his thing. Even so, Kim was very angry and said that for someone from the bottom, Lee was very greedy. He asked if Lee was trying to maintain his appearance based on his level, but Lee only told himself that, based on experience, the wisest thing to do was to avoid people like that, even though he didn't know how long he could keep doing it. After that, at the same time, the loudspeaker announced that their starting gold would be distributed, and they could use the gold in the store. Additional gold would also be given based on the number of monsters they had killed in the tutorial. The loudspeaker continued, saying that in that zone, the player with the largest amount of starting gold was, which surprised everyone, as they wondered if any of them had received that much. Kim, who received, started cursing because if he had known that would happen, he would have done better. His partner, June, who received, said that he didn't know who arrived first, but it must have been incredible. Lee, who received the largest amount of gold, told himself that the player who arrived first was him, and of course, he didn't plan on revealing that, since there was someone who was envious just because of 1 stat point. After the store opened, Lee, while browsing the store, thought there were 3 major things that could be done with gold: buying items, leveling up skills, or boosting his stats. He decided to increase his strength by 9, his endurance by, and his agility by, making all his stats, leaving a remaining amount of gold of. However, Kim was very angry, shouting about why leveling up skills was so expensive. Lee, who was behind him, thought that he also needed to level up his basic swordsmanship skills. So, after leveling up his swordsmanship, he decided to change his clothes because he couldn't keep wearing his sports uniform. However, at that moment, he was stopped by a level 3 girl named Isial, who said that she wanted to ask for advice. Lee asked why she was asking for advice from someone at level 1. Isial, with a smile, said that aside from his level, she noticed that Lee was very impressed by the girl's courage, but he used his ability to see the girl's stats, which revealed that she was from the healer class and had a lot of gold. With this information, Lee asked the girl how much gold she had at the moment. Isial answered honestly, and Lee realized that the girl was truthful, so he felt the need to hide the fact that he was using a secret trick. Lee then asked Isial if she liked exercising, and she replied that she didn't mind walking. Lee then said that it was likely that her endurance stat wasn't very good, which surprised Isial because it was true. Lee continued by saying that if she was lacking in endurance, it would be best for her to invest in it because even though she spent a lot of gold, she wouldn't be able to use the items for long. Isial nodded in agreement and said that she would follow his advice, but at that moment, they were interrupted by the loudspeaker announcing that the first floor mission would soon begin and asking them to form groups of 3. Players who didn't have a group would be placed in random groups, and they were given a few minutes to decide which group they would join. Lee, hearing the announcement, realized that he had thought there would be a group mission, but it came sooner than he expected. Then, June suggested that they tell each other their classes since they could see each other's levels. People began revealing their classes, and players started forming teams with the people they wanted. After that, Isial approached Lee to ask if he wanted to join her. She became the first member of Lee's team because there was no reason to refuse a healer's invitation. However, the other players' answers were the same, which was to refuse. Even though there was a healer, they might have been bothered by having to team up with a level 1 swordsman, and since the level 4 players were very relaxed, everyone had already formed their teams. The remaining players were, but she didn't have time to finish her sentence because the loudspeaker announced that time was up and incomplete teams would be randomly assigned. After the teams were randomly formed, the first floor mission began, where someone said that they were unlucky. We see who said those words. It was Kim, who said that he didn't expect to be in a group with Lee. Lee looked at him and felt that he also didn't expect Kim to be less popular than him when he was at level 4. He wondered if it was possible to cooperate with that man, but since the situation was like that, he had to try. He looked up and said that he had to survive in that place. We soon transition to a scene where they are observing a village because they have to complete the mission given by the system, which is to exterminate the kobold tribe within a certain time. However, Kim arrogantly told Lee that he would defeat the tribe and asked Lee not to get in his way. Lee reminded him that this was a team mission, but Kim threateningly said that he would allow Lee to follow him from behind. He asked why Lee was talking so much and called him a loser. Lee, realizing that Kim couldn't be changed, could only sigh and say that it was okay, and he would follow the man to see how well he did. As they began moving toward the tribe, Kim said that he would follow from behind, so why did Lee have to reveal unnecessary things when he only acted when someone was about to kill him? The girl watching the situation felt worried and wondered if the group would be okay. While Kim complained about the insects around him, Lee said that they really needed to complete this mission without any issues, so they continued walking toward the tribe. However, when Lee saw the insects and other small animals, he said that it was true that there were a lot of insects because they were in the mountains. While observing the insects and cutting some plants, he was stopped by Isial, who said that the kobold monsters should be strong. Lee said that perhaps the monster was stronger than a one-horned raccoon, but since they were still at level 1, it should be manageable. He also said that they needed to be cautious because they were in the final tower. At that moment, they saw a muscular figure with a tight abdomen and large legs, which turned out to be a high-level kobold monster. Seeing it, Lee became nervous and thought that the difference was too great. He said that the monster was clearly much stronger than a one-horned raccoon, so he asked Lee what they should do. Lee replied by saying that they should check the surroundings first because there might be more kobolds nearby. However, at that moment, the red-haired one started moving and told Lee why he kept hiding like a coward, and that's why he was still at level 1. Then, he jumped towards the kobold monster and delivered a powerful punch to its snout. This surprised both Joel and Lee, while the red-haired one looked very pleased. We see that the kobold was able to withstand the punch. The red-haired one, seeing the monster endure his punch, quickly prepared his left hand to strike it again. But Lee, watching the situation, said that he couldn't believe the red-haired one was so reckless and didn't expect him to be that stubborn. Isial began using her healing powers to assist the red-haired one. Lee, while turning back, mentioned that luckily, he didn't see any other kobolds. Then he noticed the red-haired one, where we saw the kobold's HP slowly decreasing. The red-haired one truly demonstrated their level of power, and with Isial's help, they might be able to defeat it alone. However, he wondered why the damage dealt was so low compared to his strength. Then, the guide informed him that kobolds are passive monsters that won't attack unless provoked. After reading the guide, Lee realized that the red-haired one was stirring up a hornet's nest for no reason. While putting down the guide, he mentioned that they still needed to capture some for research. However, as he continued flipping through the guide, he realized something important. Then we switched to the red-haired one, who was launching a powerful attack, telling the kobold that for God's sake, it should die this time. However, the red-haired one ended up hitting a tree because the kobold managed to dodge the attack. But by hitting the tree, the red-haired one caused it to fall and hit another kobold. This made the kobold of that level extremely angry. They were now in a more difficult situation, having to fight 2 kobolds at once. As the red-haired one tried to fend off the monster's attacks, he turned around cursing, feeling like he was in big trouble, so he had to ask for help from Lee, who had disappeared. The red-haired one, seeing that Lee was gone, cursed, calling him a coward for running away, but was interrupted by another kobold approaching with a large club. However, Isial inflicted a minor wound on the kobold, but at the same time, she stumbled on a rock, causing her to fall. She was quite nervous as she looked back and saw the kobold approaching with the large club, But at that moment, a fruit flew toward the monster and was pierced by a sword used by Lee to deliver a double attack on the kobold. However, the cuts made by the sword caused the kobold to react by turning completely purple and then exploding. You have defeated a level 6 kobold. The red-haired one, seeing that Lee had defeated the kobold, was very shocked, as was Jizian. But Lee, with a smile, said that it was not surprising because while the creature was eating all the fruits, they didn't touch that one. So he thought something was wrong and used the system to analyze the fruit, which turned out to be a poisonous apple. That was why the creatures didn't go near it. Moreover, the guide mentioned that kobolds are vulnerable to poison. Collect poison from the mountains and use it. Then, with a wide smile while holding the poisonous apple, he said that it was the key to the level 1 mission. While the red-haired one felt slightly uneasy and angry, Lee asked Isial if she was okay, to which she replied yes and thanked him. Lee said he didn't expect others to be drawn there by the red-haired one and that it would have been dangerous if he had arrived a little later. Joel, with a smile, said that he still arrived on time, so she thanked him because without him, they couldn't have done it. While the red-haired one continued listening to the conversation, Jizian asked Lee where he had gone. Lee told her that he did come, but he didn't finish his sentence because he was cut off by Kim, who was very angry and arrogant. The man called him a loser for taking advantage of the situation by hiding in a corner when things got really dangerous. After Kim threw a few punches, Lee just countered and caught the last punch. Moreover, Kim continued saying that he realized it when he saw him gulp down the stat points. However, Lee, hearing this, wondered what he meant by peloti, and while Kim walked away angrily, Lee wondered if he was crazy. Sighing, he said to himself that if he couldn't interpret the scene, he would be in bigger trouble. After that, we move to the kobold village where we see Lee easily taking down monsters using a poison-coated sword. But Kim, seriously, said that he was an expert in the punch scene, and those lowly monsters would never be able to stop him. While he continued struggling to defeat a single kobold, Lee had already taken down several of them. Kim saw this and started cursing, then wondered how he could do it so easily. However, not paying attention to the monsters, he took a heavy hit that caused him to fall to the ground, where the kobolds started beating him. While the monsters kept hitting him, Kim said it hurt a lot and begged for help. As he kept getting hit, Kim began to cry, but at the same time, he realized he was no longer being hit. The monsters that were hitting him stood still and then quickly exploded. As the pieces of the monsters fell to the ground, Lee extended his hand to Kim and said with a smile that he had covered for him for a while, then asked how he was feeling. Kim immediately changed his expression to one that was hard to explain and said to Lee that he was like a big brother. This left both of them completely shocked. After completing the mission, they returned to the lobby, where Kim, who was very worried, wondered what he had done. We see that he told Lee to serve him, calling him master. Meanwhile, Isial congratulated Lee for leveling up. Kim gritted his teeth and said that he called a level 2 novice master, and he would be doomed if that got out. However, Kim Sejong was a true man and couldn't break his promise. Lee, noticing Kim's strange behavior, wondered if he should pretend or something. But Isial realized that no one else was there, so they concluded that they were the first. Lee said that it seemed they succeeded faster than the others because they managed to find the kobold's weakness by luck. However, Isial said that it wasn't luck because it was all thanks to their observation skills. She never thought of using poison. Lee, with a smile, said that if it weren't for her support, it would have been much harder. Still, he felt like a fraud. After a few minutes, the other groups began to emerge from the portal. Lee mentioned that it seemed the other groups had also returned. The arriving groups were Kim Jun and Juno, so they wondered if they also found the poisonous apple. They wondered if the other groups would return safely. After a few minutes, 2 people emerged from the portal. After exiting, they collapsed, injured and exhausted, on the ground. Isial, seeing them, asked what happened to the third person. With tears and remembering their third comrade, they said that only the 2 of them were left. After that, the loudspeaker announced that the first level mission was completed.